I spent 9 months in jail because my fiancée said I threw her down the stairs. Lost my job. Sold my car to pay legal fees. When I got out, I ran into the guy she was cheating with. He showed me her texts bragging about getting me out of the way. I turned them in. Her case got reopened. She got 18 months. I got my life back. I was engaged to someone I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Her name was Lena. She worked as an assistant for a marketing firm and had a habit of watching crime documentaries while doing her skincare routine. I remember that detail because she once joked that she could get away with anything. I laughed at the time. I thought it was just another thing people say when they're bored. At the time, I worked maintenance for a local hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well. The job came with irregular hours and long shifts, especially when someone on the team called in sick. I'd clock 12-hour overnights without blinking, just so we could save up for our wedding. We were trying to book a place near her hometown. She wanted everything to be perfect. I didn't see the cracks forming. Not then. Lena had started acting distant, but it was easy to blame that on stress. She'd sigh a lot, say things like she felt overwhelmed. When I asked if she still wanted the wedding, she'd give me a tired smile and say yes, just tired, just pressure from work, just bills. There was always something. One night, I got home a little earlier than usual. My shift had been cut short because of a power outage at the hospital. I didn't call ahead. I figured I'd surprise her with takeout. The house was dark when I walked in. No music, no TV, just quiet. I dropped the food on the kitchen table and called her name. She didn't answer. I went upstairs. The hallway light was flickering. I took the stairs down again to check the fuse box. Halfway down, I heard a crash. Then screaming. I turned the corner and saw her lying on the floor near the last step, clutching her arm and sobbing. My stomach sank. I rushed down to her, asking what happened. She flinched when I got close. Told me not to touch her. I froze. She screamed louder. The neighbors must have heard it, because within 5 minutes there were flashing lights outside and 2 officers at the door. I tried explaining what happened, that I had just come down the stairs, that I hadn't even touched her. She told them I pushed her. She said I'd done it before, that she hadn't come forward because she was scared. That night, she finally broke. The officers didn't even question it. I was handcuffed on my own front lawn. One of them asked if I had a history of aggression. I said no. They said that's what they all say. The night ended in a holding cell, still in my work pants, sitting on a concrete bench trying to understand what had just happened. I kept waiting for someone to figure it out. Surely they'd check the hallway, realize she'd just fallen. She must have slipped. Maybe she hit her head. I kept trying to give her excuses. The next morning, I was charged with aggravated assault. My lawyer told me to stay calm. He said it didn't look good, but that if she didn't have a pattern of abuse to prove, it would be hard to convict me. Then she handed in a list of prior incidents, dates I supposedly shoved her, screamed at her, slammed a door near her face. None of it had ever happened, but I couldn't prove it hadn't. My bail hearing was a mess. She showed up in a sling and told the judge she feared for her life. Bail was denied. I spent the next 9 months in jail. No criminal record, no violent past, but none of that mattered once the court saw her in tears, bandaged and shaking. I sat in a cell while prosecutors sorted through text messages and statements from her friends that she always seemed nervous around him. The same friends who'd sat at our kitchen table for game nights and wine. My job terminated me in the 3rd week. They didn't want the attention. My car was sold 2 months in. My lawyer wasn't cheap, and I didn't want to ask my parents for help. They called me once. After that, it got quiet. I shared a cell with 2 other men, one of whom was in for something he swore he didn't do either. We didn't talk much. I kept to myself. I thought maybe when the trial came, everything would clear. Someone would notice the lack of evidence. Someone would ask why the neighbors never heard a fight. Someone would point out that we never had police at the house before. But the day never came. Just silence. Then, in the 9th month, the case collapsed. Not because someone finally believed me. The judge ruled that the prosecution had failed to secure the correct chain of evidence on a key report. No conviction. No exoneration either. Just dismissed. The morning I walked out, I had the clothes I came in with and a half-dead phone. My apartment was gone. My name was in Google search results under domestic violence suspect released. People didn't read the part where it said, charges dropped. The worst part? I still missed her. Not because I wanted her back. Because I wanted to understand. Why she did it. Why she chose that night. Why she made it look so real. Why she looked me in the eyes as the cuffs clicked and said nothing. I didn't have a plan. That was the first thing I realized after walking out. There was no welcome home. No sorry for the mistake. No one waiting at the gate. I walked 3 blocks in the wrong direction before checking a map. I had no job, no home, no transportation. All my savings were gone, either to my legal defense or frozen in joint accounts that I no longer had access to. The phone I got back had no SIM card. She must have canceled the line. I stared at it like it might still buzz, like she might call and admit something. That never happened. I stayed at a shelter the first night. It was loud, crowded, and full of men either just released or trying to disappear. I didn't talk to anyone. The staff gave me a pamphlet on job placement. I spent the next day walking across the city, applying for whatever work didn't require background checks or references. Everything I'd built was gone, and yet she was still living in the apartment we'd picked out together. My name was still on the lease. I didn't even fight it. I just let it all go. I couldn't stomach the idea of seeing her again. By the third day, I was down to 2 changes of clothes, a cheap room in a halfway motel, and a small stack of applications filled out with a borrowed pen. The manager at the motel asked if I had anyone to call. I didn't answer. Late one afternoon, after leaving another failed job lead, I stopped by a gas station on the edge of town to buy a bottle of water. I was walking out when a black SUV pulled into the lot. The guy inside stepped out and headed toward the pump, but paused when he saw me. His eyes widened like he recognized me. I recognized him too, but it took me a moment. His name was Rick. I'd met him once, maybe twice. He worked at the same company as Lena, some senior marketing guy who always showed up to the firm's happy hours. He was the kind of guy who made everyone laugh without trying too hard. I remembered asking Lena once if anything had ever happened between them, mostly out of insecurity. She laughed and called me paranoid. Rick looked at me like he was seeing a ghost. He hesitated, then nodded. "Kevin," he said, low, cautious. I didn't say anything. I kept walking toward the edge of the parking lot. "Wait. Hey, hold on," he said, jogging up. "Can I talk to you?" I stopped, but didn't face him. My fists tightened. The last person I wanted to talk to was someone from her circle. I expected a confrontation. Maybe he came to gloat. Maybe he wanted to rub in that he was still working, still living comfortably, while I was walking around like a ghost. Instead, his voice dropped. I didn't know, man, about any of it. I turned slightly. He wasn't sneering. He looked uncomfortable. Guilty, even. "You didn't know what?" I asked. He paused again, looked over his shoulder, then reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I found something a few days ago," he said. "Something I think you should see." I narrowed my eyes, unsure if this was a setup or some kind of game. But then he opened his messages, started scrolling, turned the screen toward me. It was a thread of texts. Lena's name at the top. She had sent him dozens of messages, some from around the time I'd been arrested, others even earlier. The first one was dated 2 weeks before the night of her fall. "Once he's out of the picture, things get easier. You can stay over without sneaking around." Then another. "Can't believe they bought it. I should get a damn Oscar." And more. He was becoming a problem. This was the cleanest way. I'm not risking my career for a breakup sob story. I stopped reading. My hands started shaking, not from anger, but from something else. Something I didn't even have a name for. My brain couldn't process what I was seeing. I looked up at Rick. "You knew she was seeing you while we were engaged?" "I didn't," he said quickly. "At least not until after you were arrested. She said you two were separated. She told me you'd hit her, and she had to leave." I believed it. I didn't question it. I should have. I didn't respond. He handed me the phone. "Take it," he said. I transferred the whole thread to a backup drive too, just in case. She doesn't know I found it. I went through some old backups and saw things that didn't add up. I'm sorry. I didn't know who she really was. I took the phone. My fingers hovered over the screen, but I couldn't bring myself to read more. I felt like I was outside my body. It wasn't just the cheating. It wasn't even the betrayal. It was the way she made it all look real. The way she'd played it out with no fear of being caught. The way she'd built an entire false life and gotten everyone to believe her. Rick gave me a flash drive from his glove compartment, said it had the entire message thread, full metadata, screenshots, even some location tags from his phone if I needed proof they'd been together during the dates she claimed I was abusing her. I didn't ask him why he was giving it to me. He just said he didn't want to be part of something like that. He looked disgusted with himself and scared. I didn't thank him. I couldn't. My mouth wouldn't open. I just walked away, the phone in one hand and the flash drive in the other. That night, I sat in my motel room staring at the evidence. I didn't eat, didn't turn on the lights, just sat in the dark, reading through messages that made everything I remembered about Lena unravel. She had planned it, carefully, like a performance. She wrote about the bruises, how she'd make sure they looked convincing. She sent him photos of her checking makeup shades to make it pop. She even joked about crying on cue. I read a message where she said, "He'll be out of the way soon. Maybe not for good, but long enough for me to get what I need." That was the moment my mind snapped out of the fog. It wasn't heartbreak. It was clarity. For the first time since walking out of jail, I knew exactly what needed to happen. The next morning, I printed every message. I copied the flash drive 3 times. I took the package to the courthouse and filed for a case review with the DA's office. They almost didn't take me seriously, until I dropped the flash drive on the counter. The woman at the courthouse desk glanced at the envelope I handed over like it was just another complaint from just another bitter ex. I could tell she'd seen hundreds of people walk in, waving accusations and conspiracies. But I didn't say much. I didn't beg her to listen. I just slid the evidence across the counter and told her calmly that it would be worth her time. She asked me to wait in the hallway. 3 hours passed before anyone called me in. A young assistant prosecutor sat me down in a windowless room with peeling paint and old case files piled against the walls. She introduced herself, flipped open her laptop, and asked me to explain everything from the beginning. So I did. No dramatics. Just facts. The timeline. The arrest. The 9 months. The dismissal. Then I handed her the printouts and the flash drive. For the first 10 minutes, she nodded along politely. Then her expression changed. I watched her face tense, her jaw tighten. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. She asked where the messages came from. I told her the man my ex had been seeing gave them to me after discovering the truth. I gave her his name, job, phone number, and even screenshots showing the original timestamps and device metadata. She didn't ask for more. She just said someone would contact me. They did. 3 days later, the call came from the district attorney's office. They told me the evidence was being reviewed for possible charges: perjury, filing a false police report, and obstruction of justice. It wasn't a guarantee. Nothing ever is. But they wanted me to come in and testify, under oath, about everything I'd experienced. I agreed without hesitation. I had no illusions about what would happen. I didn't expect her to confess or apologize. But I wanted the lies on record. I wanted her to sit in a courtroom, this time not as the crying victim, but as the accused. I wanted her to see me walk through the same doors in a different light. The hearing was set within 2 weeks. I showed up wearing the same suit I had worn to our engagement photos. I stood in the hallway outside the courtroom, my hands calm, my head clear. She arrived 10 minutes late. Lena walked in wearing the same calculated fragility I remembered from my trial. Her hair pulled back neatly, a blazer over her shoulders, a slightly trembling lip. She scanned the room, probably expecting another easy win. But her expression faltered when she saw me seated behind the prosecution's table. No handcuffs, no jumpsuit, no shame. She turned to her lawyer and whispered something. Her attorney, a smug-looking man in a tailored suit, smiled and walked over to the clerk. He asked if the hearing was really necessary. Said this was probably a misunderstanding. The judge didn't smile back. She told him to wait. The court came to order. The assistant prosecutor opened the file and began laying out the facts. No emotion, no commentary, just dates, testimonies, message logs. She described how the original domestic violence charges had been based on Lena's sworn statements. She then presented the new evidence, correspondence that directly contradicted those claims. She explained that the texts were time-stamped to the days Lena claimed she'd been abused, but in those same messages, she had joked about manipulating witnesses and staging injuries. Rick had agreed to testify. He showed up in a press shirt and sat in the gallery, pale and quiet. When called, he walked to the stand and confirmed that the messages came directly from his device. He said he hadn't altered them, that he had believed her at first, until he found out what she was really doing. He looked down when describing how it felt, realizing he'd been part of something so twisted. Lena's lawyer objected to almost every line of questioning. He claimed the messages were private, irrelevant, possibly forged. But the data had already been verified by the DA's digital forensics team. Phone logs matched. Cloud backups matched. The prosecution had it all. Then came my turn. I stood at the witness stand and answered everything. I described the night of the arrest, the silence in the house, the sound of her scream, the way she flinched just in time, as if rehearsed. I described the months in jail, the jobs I lost, the time spent sitting in a cell, thinking it must have been my fault, the way everyone around me quietly turned away. I spoke like I was reading a ledger, just the facts. When I finished, no one said a word. Not even Lena. Her lawyer asked for a recess. The judge didn't grant it. The prosecutor called attention to several texts where Lena had specifically mentioned lying in court. One mentioned her being surprised that no one questioned her injuries. Another made fun of the public defender assigned to me, saying she almost laughed during his objections. At that point, Lena finally spoke up. She stood without being asked and shouted that the messages were being taken out of context, that I was framing her, that the court was enabling an abuser. Her voice cracked and rose to a pitch that echoed around the room. But no one moved. The judge asked her to sit down. She refused. 2 bailiffs stepped forward. She called them all idiots. The judge didn't raise her voice. She simply ordered that Lena be taken into custody pending further investigation into perjury and malicious prosecution. Her lawyer tried to protest, said she had no prior record, that this was too extreme. The judge said falsely accusing someone of a violent crime was extreme. As they cuffed her, Lena turned around and looked at me. Not with anger. Not with regret. Just confusion. Like she genuinely didn't understand how it had all gone wrong. Like she still thought she'd win. I didn't speak to her. I didn't smirk or nod. I just watched. She left through the same door I once entered in chains. I stayed seated, watching the courtroom slowly empty. The prosecutor walked by, paused, and said something about justice. I didn't reply. I didn't need her reassurance. I'd already gotten what I came for. The weight wasn't gone, not completely. Nothing gives back what was taken. But for the first time in nearly a year, I wasn't carrying it alone. Lena's arraignment was held 2 weeks after the hearing. I didn't attend. There was no point. The state had enough to move forward without me being present. The prosecutor said the text records alone made it open and shut. Still, I kept in touch with the assistant DA who handled the case. She said Lena tried to plead for leniency, claimed mental distress, claimed she had been manipulated into it, said I had emotionally cornered her, and that she acted out of desperation. No one bought it. The court appointed a psychologist to evaluate her. The report came back clear. No psychosis. No trauma-based breakdown. Just someone who had grown used to faking vulnerability to get what she wanted. When sentencing came, I did go. I didn't want revenge. I wanted record. I wanted it printed, filed, and recorded on every system that had once held my name under suspicion. I wanted it official. Not whispered through friends. Not posted in some Facebook apology. I wanted the law to say what really happened. The courtroom that day was nearly empty. Just a few legal aides, 2 officers, the judge, and Lena's parents, who sat quietly behind her, stiff and uncomfortable. Her mother never looked at me. Her father did. Only once. Lena sat in her chair like she hadn't slept in days. The bravado was gone. No more subtle smirks. No more fake tremble in her voice. Just flat silence. Her lawyer gave a half-hearted argument about minimal prior history, no criminal record, and how jail time might be counterproductive. The prosecutor pushed back hard. She emphasized the consequences of Lena's lies: 9 months of incarceration, public defamation, financial collapse, emotional trauma. The judge didn't deliberate for long. Lena was sentenced to 18 months in state prison, with an additional probation period afterward and a permanent mark on her criminal record. She was also ordered to pay restitution. Not that I expected to see a cent of it. When the sentence was read, Lena didn't cry. She didn't speak. She didn't look at me. She just stood when told and let the bailiffs take her away. The click of the cuffs was soft, but it echoed inside my head like it was hitting metal. And then, like that, she was gone. I stepped outside the courthouse into cold, clear air. No reporters. No cameras. No witnesses. Just me on the sidewalk, still holding the court folder they'd handed me. Proof that my name had been cleared. I didn't call anyone. I walked until I found a bench near the park and sat for a long time, just breathing. Not deeply. Not dramatically. Just normally. It had been over a year since I had felt what that even meant. There was no happiness in what happened. No satisfaction in watching someone go to prison. No gloating. Just a release of tension that had wrapped itself so tightly around my body I had forgotten it was there. I rented a room again. This time with my own money from part-time jobs I had been quietly doing while the investigation was underway. I used cash. I didn't want to risk credit. I bought groceries for the first time in months and made dinner that night. Nothing fancy. Pasta, some canned sauce, tap water. It was the best meal I'd had in over a year. That night, I fell asleep without locking the bedroom door, without pacing, without checking the corners of the room for shadows that looked like uniforms. No alarms, no thoughts of courtrooms, no fake crying in stairwells, no dreams about people turning away from me. Just silence. And for the first time in 9 months, it wasn't terrifying. It was mine. The next morning, I printed out a clean copy of the court documents. I went to every place that had denied me a job or flagged my name in a background check and handed it over without saying much. Some apologized. Most didn't. That was fine. One of them rehired me. Different branch. Different supervisor. But same company. I took the job without hesitation. No explanation. No drama. Just clocked in and got to work. People asked about the past year. I kept it vague. I told them I'd been dealing with some personal stuff. No one pressed. The ones who did, I avoided. I didn't know anyone the full story. I started saving again. Bought a used car. Paid in full. No loan. No strings. I stopped checking her social media. There was nothing left to see. Whatever life she had before, she'd shattered it herself. The lies had caught up to her, and they didn't need me chasing them down. That was over. I didn't forgive her, but I didn't hate her either. What she did was calculated, cruel, and destructive, but carrying that weight didn't reverse the damage. And I didn't want her actions to define the rest of my life. So I left it. I let the file sit on a shelf. I moved on, not in the way people post about, not with some grand symbolic gesture, but in the small ways that mattered. I started laughing again, slowly, at things that didn't involve her. I went days without thinking about her name. I walked into rooms without worrying who might recognize me from the news. I stopped looking over my shoulder. I started living again. That was enough. And that's the story. If you're still here, that means you're one of us. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button. I drop new chaos every single day, and trust me, tomorrow's story, it's even worse than this one.